Confession 17. We do not quarrel with anything you say, they tell me, except your interpretation of the words, "In the beginning God made heaven and earth." When Moses wrote them by the revelation of the Holy Spirit, he did not have in mind the two things which you describe. By heaven, he did not mean that spiritual or intellectual creature which forever contemplates God face to face. And by earth, he did not mean matter without form. What then did he mean, I ask? We can explain what Moses had in mind and what he meant to convey by those words. What is your explanation? The words heaven and earth are a brief and comprehensive preliminary phrase used by Moses to mean the whole of the visible world. Afterwards, he went on to detail, one by one, in the enumeration of the days, all the things which it pleased the Holy Spirit to make known in this way. The people for whom he wrote were so primitive and earthbound that he thought it unsuitable to tell them of any but the visible works of God. Having said this, they agree that the earth, which was invisible and without form, and the deep, over which darkness reigned, that is, the substance from which, as we are subsequently told, all the visible things with which we are familiar were made and set in order during the 6 days, may without inconsistency be taken to mean the formless matter of which I have spoken. Others may maintain that the phrase heaven and earth was used in the first sentence of Genesis to signify the same formless and confused matter, because it was from it that our visible world, with all the phenomena which it so evidently contains, and which we often enough refer to in the aggregate as heaven and earth, was created and perfected. Others again may say that the phrase heaven and earth not inappropriately signifies nature, whether visible or invisible, and therefore these two words cover the whole of creation, that is, all that God made in his wisdom, or in other words, in the beginning. Yet it was all made not from God's own substance, but from nothing. This I do not dispute, for created things are not the same as God. In all of them there is the principle of mutability, whether they remain steadfast like the eternal house of God or undergo change like man's soul and body. Therefore the argument goes on. The common matter of all things, whether visible or invisible, is what is meant by those two words. It was still formless but had the potentiality of form. From it, heaven and earth were to be made, in other words, the invisible and the visible creation, to each of which form has now been added. This matter is referred to both as earth, invisible and without form, and as darkness over the deep, with the distinction that earth, invisible and without form, means corporeal matter before it was defined by form, and darkness over the deep, spiritual matter, before a limit was fixed to what we might call its unconstrained fluidity, and before the light of wisdom banished its darkness. Still, another theory might be that when we read the verse, "In the beginning God made heaven and earth," we're not meant to understand by the words heaven and earth two natures, invisible and visible, already perfected and endowed with form, but a rudimentary beginning of things, matter still formless but capable of receiving form and serving the purpose of creation. These names were used to describe it, because there already existed in it, though confusedly and still without distinction of quality or form, the two creatures, which now that each has been set in its proper order, we call heaven and earth, the one spiritual, the other corporeal.